is that when we talk about calories out, everyone assumes it's just one thing. You know, it's like, how much did I exercise, for example, that day? They forget that actually calories out could well be four different things. The basal metabolic rate, as you've mentioned. So, you know, how much energy does it take to keep the lights on in your body, lungs, kidneys, whatever it might be. There's also the thermogenic effects of foods. The whole context of things, it's relatively small, but still that's part of that calories out part of the equation. There's purposeful movement and exercise, which yes, can burn some calories, although potentially not as much as people think. And then there's also NEAT, you know, non-exercise activated thermogenesis, a kind of non-purposeful movement. All these kind of subtleties people are not thinking about when they're thinking about that equation. So I think for many reasons, while scientifically that equation may be true, in terms of practical application for most people, it has very little value. And I think this is a wider point, Jason, for me, which is there's a lot of technical scientific debate around these kind of topics: insulin, calories in, calories out. You know, for me, like you as a practicing clinician, it's like, well, you know what? Yeah, we can debate these little nuances in the science, or we can simplify things and just help people do what we know and we see repeatedly work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I feel that's one of the reasons I very much like your approach. You have seen tens of thousands of patients. You've helped probably millions of people through the internet now and through your books across the world. A lot of people are gaining huge value from this. And I think we sometimes miss that when we're trying to dot all the I's and cross the T's with the science. It's important, but it's not everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And this whole idea that, you know, a certain number of calories, 100 calories of bread versus 100 calories of egg, are going to have different effects on the body. They have different hormonal effects. It boils down practically to a simple idea. That is, some foods are more fattening than other foods, which is, of course, an idea that your grandmother would have thought blindly obvious, right? Like, who gets fat eating broccoli? Like, zero people in the whole world. Who gets fat eating cookies? Many, many, many people, right? And she didn't understand the difference between, you know, the hormonal responses of broccoli versus cookies. But she understood that you eat these foods, you know, and this goes back hundreds of years, because the first low carb diet was sort of like Banting in the 1800s, right? So you're talking about at least 150 years. People have said, hey, certain things really make people gain weight. And even if you go back to Ansel Keys, for example, so he did a very interesting study in the 40s, the Minnesota starvation study. Interestingly, it wasn't a starvation study at all. It was a 1,500 calorie a day diet, 1,570 calories, which is actually not far off of what people advise for weight loss. Very high starch foods, because that was what was available in post-war Europe at the time. So when he measured metabolic rate, it dropped by like 40%. When you dropped calories by about 40%, metabolic rate dropped by about 40%. And what happened? He actually measured other things. So heart volume shrank, stroke volume, like the amount of blood that you pump out, went down. People were cold, so they're generating less body heat because they're burning 40% less calories. You're sort of these sort of metabolic housekeeping things, like how much blood, so you're not pumping blood, you're more tired, you get, you know, you're not generating body heat, you're cold, right? So the whole point is that, yeah, all of these things are important. This calories out is not just exercise. The majority of it is, you know, basal metabolic rate. And you don't control that through your mind, right? You control that through your hormones. It's your hormones that control everything. That's just the way it works in the human body. Everything is controlled by hormones. You don't control how strong your bones are. That's controlled by growth hormone and other hormones, parathyroid hormones, right? You don't control how active your thyroid is. So this idea that it's all about willpower, you know, because people look at this thing, they go, body fat equals calories in minus calories out. So therefore, calories in is what you eat, calories out is exercise. It's all willpower. It's like, that's nonsense. It actually doesn't work for anybody, because you have to actually, it's an extremely simplistic way of looking at things. When you go one level deeper and say, okay, calories in minus calories out, it's what you eat and what you exercise. Let's go one level deeper. Why is it that you're eating more or eating the wrong foods? Well, it's because you're hungry. So that comes back to your hormones. And then you look at calories out. Well, it's exercise. Let's go one level deeper. It's actually mostly basal metabolic rate. So you can control what you eat, but you can't control how hungry you are. You can't decide to be less hungry. You can't decide that you're going to burn more calories. So it's all down to your
Yeah.
hormones. It wasn't due to willpower at all. So you can take a drug such as semaglutide, which is a weight loss drug now. When you completely whack that appetite, in half, people lose weight. It never was willpower. It was that you controlled the hunger as opposed to the calorie, right? It all comes down to hormones. The human body is run by hormones. That is the chemical messengers that tell our body what to do. And this idea that it comes down to something so simplistic like calories. Calories is such a terrible notion because not terrible. It's just misused because it's a unit from physics, not physiology, right? So it's the amount of heat energy that is contained in a certain amount of food. It doesn't tell anything about how our body is going to use it. A block of wood may have 100 calories. If you eat that block of wood, you will get none of it, right? So it's like, well, that's it, right? I mean, there's lots of calories in a block of wood, but you won't absorb any of it. It's just a unit of physics. Physiology is what happens in the human body, right? Where are the calorie receptors? Do we have calorie counters within our body that say, you took this many calories, therefore this, right? And you look at the failure of that sort of academic notion that we can be so precise that we are now physicists, not physicians, right? Like, we're physicians. That sort of stuff from physics doesn't work because it doesn't jive with how the human body works. We don't have calorie counters. We don't have calorie receptors. Like, there is nothing in our body that senses how many calories you eat.
And it doesn't account for the realities of modern life where people are sleep deprived, right? And therefore their hunger and satiety hormones are completely off whack. It doesn't account for chronic stress, which raises that hormone you mentioned earlier, cortisol, which again has a huge effect on our hunger and all kinds of things and where we might store that body fat. The human body is just much more complex. And I think a lot of people have a certain bias, right? So if you're a personal trainer, I guess, your bias is probably the subset of people you've seen, people who are coming to see you who believe that actually working out regularly, exercising hard is really, really important to lose weight. And of course, it can form part of the overall strategy of things, but therefore your view as a personal trainer is going to be hugely impacted by what you see. Of course, my view is hugely impacted by what I've seen over 20 years, tens of thousands of patients. But as a general practitioner, I guess one thing I would say is that you see everything. You literally see everything. You see people who've got all kinds of issues, and therefore I feel that gives you insight into a whole variety of different people, different lifestyles, people who are shift workers, and you're a practicing clinician as well. I guess as a nephrologist, you will also see a huge amount of different people, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that you see a lot of in this sort of fitness world. And there's this sort of bro science because, you're so invested in this idea that it's all about effort, right? That all of weight loss is just due to effort and willpower, right? As opposed to, eating the right foods and all these other things that are so important, we know, like sleep and stress and so on. I used to, and I think we all did, of course, we all used to believe that, right? And I always thought in medical school and above, I used to think, weight loss is just about willpower. It's about controlling what you eat, right? And I always thought it's strange that there are a lot of medical conditions that cause weight gain and weight loss, but weight gain in particular. And I always thought it was strange because how can a medical condition cause weight gain? It's all about willpower, 100% about willpower. It's about calories in, calories out. And then I thought, how is that possible that you have a medical condition that has nothing to do with willpower, right? So if you have Prader-Willi or any of these other conditions that cause obesity, Cushing's disease, how can that cause weight gain? Because we know that it's caused by sort of effort, right? So it's very strange, but as you go on, then you realize, no, it's all about the hormones. Like, you give somebody insulin, and I don't really care how much willpower you have, you gain weight. Why? Because you're literally telling your body to gain that weight. So therefore, if that's the important thing, then how are you going to minimize those instructions to gain weight? Well, you eat natural foods. Because natural foods, even carbohydrate containing foods, natural ones have far less insulin effect than others.
Yeah.
And intermittent fasting, when you don't eat, your body is going, your insulin levels are going to go low. Your body is going to start using calories instead of storing
Yeah.
calories, right? So it's all about those hormonal effects that we have to understand, that we said were unimportant because we sort of elevated calories to be the one and only thing. And I think a lot of fitness people and a lot of scientists, in fact, love the sort of simplicity of that idea. But unfortunately, it wasn't really true. And you see it
Yeah.
all the time. Like, there's so many people, like doctors, for example. There are a lot of doctors who are overweight. And I know a lot of doctors. Most of my friends are doctors, right? And would I say that they have no willpower? Absolutely not. I've seen these people work sort of 36 hours at a time, right? When they put their mind to something, they will absolutely go out and do it. Nothing will stop them. And yet these people are overweight. Some of them are obese. Some of them are my friends. I don't think they have no willpower.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a lack of willpower as the reason that they are overweight. I think they're eating the wrong foods because or they're getting the wrong advice to eat constantly and so on. And so many doctors have come back to me. So when I started talking about intermittent fasting, probably about 8 years ago, like, honestly, people thought I was insane. Like, it was, common knowledge that you had to eat all the time, even to lose weight, right? And when I came out and said, well, you can fast, I mean, and most of the doctors that I spoke to, because they knew me and they would listen to me, they said, this actually makes a lot of sense. And they were all like, I remember when I was in residency and training, I'd go like 24 hours without eating. Nothing bad ever happened.
Yeah.
I was so busy in the emergency. I was so busy in the operating room. I had so many patients. I just didn't eat, and nothing really happened other than I was hungry for a little while, but I was too busy. I ignored it. And I'm thinking, yeah, because when you don't eat, your body is just going to take whatever calories it needs from your body fat, and that's it. And everybody's like, yeah, I was like 30 pounds lighter at that time, right? When I didn't eat constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of physicians would always come back and say, you know what, this makes a lot of sense from a physiologic standpoint. This idea that you should eat all the time is wrong. So one, fasting is a way to eat fewer calories because you're taking it from your stores, and you're feeling full because you've taken it from your stores. Right? Just like you take food from the fridge, it doesn't mean you're less full. You're just as full as if you went to the store. Just you took those calories from a different place. You took it from storage. Same thing with body fat. You took those calories from storage as opposed to from food.
Yeah.
No difference in terms of physiology. So yeah, it's interesting because a lot of doctors themselves, even these sort of highly, highly educated people, would say it. And that's one of the things that I think has started to sort of resonate through. There's an interesting study where they did a Facebook poll of physicians and how they lose weight. And what was interesting was that 75% of people used intermittent fasting in this poll for weight loss, physicians. Yet they only counseled it for about 30%. So the huge gap was that the doctors wanted to lose weight and wanted to do something effective, which was fasting. But with their patients, they had to give sort of sanctioned advice, which didn't include the fast.
I want to get into some practical information for people. I think one of the really beautiful things you said so far is that it's not a lack of willpower. And unfortunately, this over focus on the calorie has led to a lot of people feel really bad, so that they think, I'm really trying, like I'm restricting my calorie intake, I'm not eating that much, but I can't lose weight. And they feel like failures, they feel guilt, they feel ashamed of themselves, which is really, really toxic to try and make long-term behavior change when you feel like that. So I want to go into some really practical things. Before we do, just to finish off the calories in, calories out model for a moment, my approach has always been with patients, and when I write books, I say, look, if you find that counting calories works for you and you can fit it into your life and your lifestyle and you're getting the health outcome you desire, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not saying stop doing it. If that works for you, go for your life. I'm just saying, in my experience, I haven't found it to be that helpful, certainly for most people that come to see me. What would you say to someone who is watching this and says, Jason, listen, I actually have no problem counting calories. I like counting them 3 times a day, and I can maintain my weight, I can maintain my health doing this. What would you say to that person?
I agree with you. I mean, if something's working for you, then go ahead and do it. Like, there's no reason to stop. And it really goes for anything. If you're eating 10 times a day and you're doing well with it, then go ahead. Like, be my guest. And we know everybody reacts differently, so I'm okay with that. But if you want to make a change, then you could probably that's where to start, right? Here's a good place to start, and then you decide what to do with it. And I think the other thing, I think you said that was very good, was that this idea of sort of people who aren't losing weight. What happens, of course, is that when you focus on calories and say it's all about willpower, what you're saying to these people is that they don't have the willpower, which I think is absolutely not true, because it's one of these embedded assumptions in the calories in, calories out model that nobody acknowledges, which is that calories out can go down. Your basal metabolic rate can go down when you diet. So therefore, if you are not losing weight, even as you eat fewer calories, you could still not lose weight because your metabolic rate is going down along with it. So why are you blaming these people? And that's where you get a lot of a lot of people sort of just have made that assumption that calories out is going to stay stable at 2,000 calories a day, right? This is the whole thing when you read these people who are like, oh, just cut 500 calories a day, you'll lose a pound a week. That actually never happens, because that assumes that your calories out, your metabolic rate stays at 2,000 calories. Every physiologic study we've ever done says it goes down. And it must go down. So, for example, if you take somebody who's 200 pounds, you say cut 500 calories a day, you lose a pound a week. Does that mean in 200 weeks they'll weigh 0 pounds? Like, no, absolutely not. That will never happen, even if you stick to 1,500 calories. So therefore, your metabolic rate must go down at some point. Turns out it goes down almost immediately and persists. So therefore, this idea that it was all because they skipped on their diet, right? That's not true. It might have just been a very poorly constructed diet. That is not taking into account just the foods, but also the sort of eating duration, the fasting, the hormones, what hormones you're stimulating with the foods that you're eating, what information you're giving your body, what instructions you're giving your body. There's so much of that other things that are important. And I think it's time to take that sort of guilt and shame away from those people. We're all sort of working together.
If you enjoyed that short clip, I think you are really going to enjoy the full conversation, which you can check out here.